On a quiet summer night in 1912, the small town of Vilisca fell into deep sleep. Families locked their doors after church and children drifted after the Sunday meal, and all was calm until the next morning. By morning, 8 people would be found brutally murdered in their beds. No witnesses, no motive, just a house covered in blood, silence, and covered mirrors. And even now, over a century later, the Vilisca Axe murders still remains one of America's darkest unsolved crimes and one of the great mysteries of the true crime community. And today, we're diving deep into it. The Moore family was a picture of small town perfection. Josiah Moore, or Joe as he was known in the community, was a respected businessman. He owned a local hardware store, which was a popular thing back in 1912. And he was known by everyone in Vilisca. In fact, the name Joe was known by everyone in Vilisca. Sarah, his wife, was a kind woman. She was family-oriented, and she taught Sunday school at the nearby Presbyterian church. In fact, their home was filled with so much laughter, and they were the picture of the perfect Christian couple. So the Moore couple had 4 kids. Basically, they were the typical, average, small-town family. Kids who ran barefoot, chasing one another. Neighbors came over for dinner, for lunch. They had friends who had sleepovers. They were a picture of perfection and happiness. On the 9th of June, 1912, the Moore family went to Sunday service just like every other week. Their children had 2 guests over, Lena and Ina Stillinger. And so, after service, the Stillinger girls did not want to work home all by themselves because the community was having disputes with the power company and the entire town was left in darkness. So the Stillinger girls were scared and they did not want to work home alone. So Sarah kindly invited them to spend the night with the kids, and their mother agreed to the sleepover. And so the Moore family returned back to their home at about 9:30. As the lamps were turned down and the family got ready for bed, none of them could have imagined the horror that was waiting for them within the walls of their home. The very next morning, their neighbor Mary Peckham got up at about 5 a.m. in the morning, fed her own chickens, did her chores, but at about 7:30, she noticed that there was complete silence coming from the Moore house. And Mary Peckham was so close to the family. In fact, just because her own daughter couldn't have kids of her own, she had adopted the Moore children as her own grandchildren. So she was really, really close to the family. So when she didn't hear anything from about 7:30 to 8 a.m., she went to the backyard and tried to knock on the door, hoping to just, get the attention of Sarah or find out if something was wrong. But she kept knocking and there was complete silence also coming from the house. So she called on Josiah's brother and asked him to come over. So Josiah's brother Ross Moore came over to the house, and he also found it really strange that the house was completely silent. So he used a spare key to get into the front door. But remember that it was dark. So at about 8 a.m. in the morning, it was still kind of dark and, not so bright. And so he lit a match and went into the house. And the Stillinger girls had been sleeping downstairs. So the first set of bodies he found were the Stillinger girls, and their bodies were covered with a sheet, and the mirrors were also covered with the sheet, and the entire sheets were also with blood. So he ran out and told Mary Peckham something was wrong and that he needed to call the authorities. By the time the Marshal, Heron Horton, got to the house, word had gone out. Something terrible had happened at the Moore house. So the neighbors, townspeople, and people from the surroundings all came to the house, trooping in and out of the house, touching the bodies, taking bone fragments. The women of the town felt like Sarah, being a very neat woman, would not want the house to be messy, and so they were also trying to clean up the house. The marshal found the Stillinger girls and also found the murder weapon in the downstairs bedroom. There was a bloody axe laying next to the Stillinger girls, just resting on the wall. The marshal went upstairs to the master's bedroom, and that was where he found Joe and Sarah. They had both been bludgeoned so badly that their heads and faces were just completely unrecognizable. The brutality of the crime was so bad that there were axe marks on the ceilings from where the murderer had gone back and forth hitting the victims. There was also a sharp cut on Sarah's face, alluding to the fact that maybe whilst the murderer was attacking Joe, she had gotten up, and to silence her really quickly, the murderer had to hit her with the sharp edge of the axe. He went to the children's bedroom, and there he found all 4 children. They had all gotten the same fate, all bludgeoned with the blunt edge of an axe. The blood was so bad that he had pulled through the vents of the bedroom, downstairs, right down to the living room, the parlor. The marshals had to investigate. Nothing like this happened in the quiet little town of Vilisca, and so he started searching and looking for clues. One thing to mention is that alongside the body, the marshals also found that the mirrors and all reflective surfaces of the house had been covered with sheets. The bodies had also been covered with sheets and clothing and whatever that the murderer could find. By noon that afternoon, the marshals sealed off the Vilisca home from the public, but at that time, the damage had already been done. Crowds had trooped in and out of the house, and almost every single evidence was already contaminated. But still, the police had to investigate the case. They questioned neighbors and they questioned clergy. Even travelers passing by on the nearby train lines were also questioned. Theories spread around the town like wildfire. Some swore it had to be someone local, someone who knew the Moors personally and knew the layout of the Moor house, while others argued that it was probably a stranger, a drifter that had been seen near the railroad tracks at that time of the night. But the most chilling theory came from the evidence that the police had found in the Arctic. There were cigarette butts that were found in the Arctic, alluding to the fact that someone had probably been in the house before the family got back from Sunday service, and the person had been there silently watching, just waiting for the family to go to bed before striking. The weapon of choice was obvious. It was Josiah's own axe, and it had been wiped clean of prints and left in the guest bedroom downstairs with the Stillinger girls. And it was just beside a slab of bacon and a blood-soaked lamb. Talking about the lambs, all the lamps throughout the house had been carefully adjusted. Chimneys had been removed. Wicks bent down so low to cast almost a ghost-like effect all over the house. Every window covered, every mirror draped. It felt ritualistic, controlled. The murderer had also made himself a meal but left it uneaten at the kitchen table. No valuables had been taken, and there were no signs of forced entry. This wasn't someone in a hurry, and this wasn't robbery. It felt almost personal, or something far worse. But the brutality of the murders suggested that this was somebody that had a lot of rage towards Josiah. He had been hit 30 times more than anyone else in the house. But it could also be that because he was a man and the murderer felt like he was the greatest threat in the house, he had gone overboard just to take out Josiah. But the marshals also argued, due to the precision and the methods of the murders, It suggested that this was somebody who was intelligent, someone who knew how to move in darkness, and who could kill 8 people without waking up a soul. People wanted answers. The entire town was gripped in fear. People locked their doors. Parents checked their kids time and time again during the night just to make sure they were safe and sound. The marshals, desperate for answers, even called in bloodhounds. The handlers took them to the back of the house. The dogs caught a scent, but they would lead them to the train station and stop there. So the entire town had to come up with theories, and different detectives had to come up with theories of their own. And we're going to look at some of the suspects. One of the very first suspects was a man named Frank F. Jones. He was a respected state senator and the owner of the town's largest hardware store. Years earlier, Josiah Moore had been his best salesman, and while breaking away to start his own business, Frank had accused Josiah of stealing some of his best clients. It was also rumored that Josiah was having an affair with Frank's daughter-in-law called Donna. The rivalry between the two men was no secret. Some said they had not spoken in years, and Frank would not even mention Josiah's name at all. And so when the murders happened, tongues started wagging, and it did not help Frank that while the marshals were trying to use the bloodhounds to map out the trail of the murderer, the bloodhounds had stopped within the vicinity of Frank's home to use the bathroom, and that sort of elevated the rumors that Frank had something to do with it. While most don't believe that Frank himself took out his anger on Josiah and his entire family, it is rumored and many claim that Frank had the resources and the financial means to hire a hitman to finish off Josiah. But this theory doesn't hold up that much because Frank has an alibi, and while he might have had a vendetta against Josiah, it's not feasible that he would stake his entire political career over a small town quarrel or a small town beef. So this theory doesn't really hold up that much. The next suspect was a man called William Mansfield. This was a man whose crimes made even the most hardened detectives shudder. He was a known drifter with a record of violence and a history of traveling along the same rail lines that cut through Vilisca. Detectives believed Mansfield could have been part of a string of nearly identical murders, families killed in their beds, curtains drawn, lamps dimmed, all within walking distance of a train depot. 2 years before Vilisca, Mansfield's own wife, his infant child, and in-laws had been found murdered by axe in Blue Island, Illinois. So the similarities were chilling, and an axe was also left at the scene with the mirrors covered and bodies arranged with care, just like the house in Vilisca. James Wilkerson, a private investigator working the Vilisca case, was convinced that Mansfield was the killer. Wilkerson believed that Mansfield was a traveling murderer who was sleeping from town to town under the cover of night, leaving a trail of bodies behind him. But Mansfield had a strong alibi that was backed by his own payroll records, and so he was released even though Wilkerson had initially arrested him. And this brings us to the most likely suspect, and I say the most likely suspect because this is who I believe committed the murders, and that is the person of Reverend George Kelly, also known as the Preacher of Nightmares. Reverend George Kelly was a small man. He was a traveling minister and someone who was always nervous and some might even call eccentric. So, Kelly was known for his very strange sermons and really unsettling behavior. He was obsessed with religion and being pure, and he often wrote letters to women, filling them with really lewd and inappropriate content. On that Sunday night, Kelly had attended the Children's Day service at the Presbyterian Church where the Moore family had worshipped that night. Witnesses recalled seeing Kelly at the service, and some said he was there all by himself, alone, and just watching from the back. Kelly also left town really early on the morning of the murders on a train to Macedonia at about 5:19 a.m. And on the train and at the train station, he told anyone who would listen that there were 8 trapped souls in the house in Vilisca. And this was hours before anyone even knew that this horrific crime had taken place. And when Kelly was questioned about it later, he claimed that he had gotten it in a divine revelation. Kelly also told the lady that one of the biggest mistakes that the Vilisca murderer had done was send a blood-soaked shirt to a particular dry cleaner. And when that dry cleaner was tracked down, it was found that it was a dry cleaner that was within the same area where Kelly was at the time of the murder. And so years later, when guilt probably had eaten at him way too much, Kelly started calling investigators, calling the police, sending letters to the investigators, and even to the families of the victims, offering theories and telling people that the murderer had to be forgiven because he had killed before. He was just really obsessed with the case. In 1917, the police could no longer ignore Kelly, so he was arrested. After Kelly's arrest in 1917, it was so quick for Kelly to confess. He told the investigators that he entered the Moore home long after midnight, and the lamps were already out in the house, and the house was in complete silence. He found the axe by the back door, and a spirit guided him into the home towards the main bedroom where Josiah and Sarah Moore were sleeping, and there he bludgeoned and killed the parents. In Kelly's own words, he said, "I raised the axe high and it fell upon him. The sound was like a melon splitting open." He said Sarah stared a little during the murders, and before she could scream, he hit her with the sharp edge of the axe. And then he moved to the children's bedroom. He said he didn't want to, but the spirit told him to finish what he started. And so he remembered the moonlight in the room and the children's faces looking like angels, but still he bludgeoned them to death. He covered their faces, he covered the mirrors, he blew out the lamp, and he remembered pulling the curtains really tight because he was trying to hide his sin from heaven. And so he went downstairs, went to the kitchen, made himself a meal, but the same spirit came back to him and told him to kill again. And he went into the third bedroom and killed, and took a slab of bacon from the icebox. And remember, this was 1912, so this was a time when people would store their meat and perishables in ice boxes. There were no refrigerators at that time. He put the slab of bacon on the floor just by the side of the axe, and when he was asked why he did this, in his own words, he said he wanted it to look like a sacrifice. When the police pressed Kelly for more, his answers began to unravel. Sometimes his story would match the crime scene, and at other times it wouldn't. Sometimes he would give clues and stories that had nothing to do with the murders. Sometimes he would also claim that he got the details from God and God had appeared to him and told him, "Suffer not the little children, so send them unto me," and that was why he committed the murders. At other time, he would say he was never there and he got all of it in a vision. And so Kelly's testimony was really unreliable, but still, the marshals and the court of law decided to try Kelly. After 2 trials, the police decided that Reverend George Kelly wasn't the murderer, and so he was acquitted and he walked free. And even though he was acquitted, it is believed, even by me, that Kelly was responsible for the murders because he was the only person who knew details about the murders before it was even discovered, and even after. He gave some really key details and key points that only the murderer could have known. So a lot of people, including myself, believe that Kelly is the Vilisca axe murderer. After Kelly's acquittal, the case went cold. Every lead just dissolved into rumor. Every suspect had walked away as a free man, and the townspeople were left with more questions than answers. And over the decades, investigators and internet sleuths have all tried to solve the Vilisca axe murders. But the truth is, we will never know what happened that night. And today, the Vilisca home is still there, still standing, and is now a tourist location for people passing through Vilisca, Iowa. But the memories and the presence of the Moore family will always be felt in their little home in Vilisca, Iowa. And this brings an end to this episode. It's your girl Melissa, and this is the monster under the bed.